What if I told you that every step you take through a forest, you're walking through the world's most sophisticated internet network? What if the plants around you right now are not just alive, but actively watching you, communicating about your presence, and making decisions based on what they perceive? What if everything you thought you knew about intelligence, consciousness, and life itself has been turned upside down by discoveries so revolutionary that they're forcing us to rewrite the very definition of what it means to be alive? Today, we're diving into the secret life of plants, and I promise you, by the end of this journey, you'll never look at a tree, a flower, or even a blade of grass the same way again. We're about to explore a hidden world where plants wage chemical warfare, form alliances, care for their young, and exhibit behaviors so complex that some scientists are beginning to ask the forbidden question. Are plants conscious? But here's what will absolutely blow your mind. The evidence I'm about to show you isn't science fiction. It's happening right now, all around you, in a language you never knew existed. And once you learn to see it, you'll realize that plants might be far more intelligent than we ever imagined possible. Hit that subscribe button, because we're about to embark on a journey that will challenge everything you believe about life. On Earth, let me start by completely shattering your assumptions about what intelligence actually means. When you think of intelligence, you probably picture a brain, neurons firing, thoughts forming. But what if I told you that intelligence doesn't require a brain at all? What if intelligence is actually about information processing, decision-making, and adaptive behavior, things that plants have been perfecting for over 450 million years, while we mammals were still figuring out how to breathe air? Dr. Monica Gagliano at the University of Western Australia has spent the last decade proving something that should be impossible. Plants can learn, remember, and make decisions. In one groundbreaking experiment published in 2016, she worked with Mimosa pudica, the sensitive plant that folds its leaves when touched. Here's where it gets mind-bending. She repeatedly dropped these plants from a small height. At first, they closed their leaves in defense. But after just a few drops, something extraordinary happened. The plants stopped responding. They had learned that the stimulus wasn't actually dangerous. But here's the kicker. When Gagliano tested them again weeks later, they still remembered. Plants with no brain, no nervous system as we understand it, had formed memories and retained them. This wasn't just a simple chemical reaction. This was learning, the hallmark of intelligence. Think of it like this. Imagine you're blindfolded in a room full of strangers, but you can somehow sense everything about them, their mood, their health, their intentions, even their genetic makeup. You can't see or hear in the traditional sense, but you're constantly gathering information, processing it, and making decisions based on what you perceive. That's essentially what every plant around you is doing right now. Dr. Daniel Chemovitz, author of What a Plant Knows, has shown that plants can see, smell, feel, remember, and even anticipate future events. They just do it in ways so alien to our experience that we've been blind to their abilities for centuries. A sunflower doesn't just turn toward the sun randomly. It's making calculated decisions based on light quality, intensity, and even the time of day. It's predicting where the sun will be and positioning itself accordingly. But if plants are truly intelligent, then we need to ask the uncomfortable question. What else have we gotten wrong about the living world around us? The answer is about to get far stranger than you can imagine. Because plants don't just think, they talk. What I'm about to reveal to you exists beneath your feet right now. Every forest, every garden, every patch of green space is connected by a network so sophisticated it makes our internet look primitive. Scientists call it the Wood Wide Web, and it's been operating for hundreds of millions of years without us even knowing it existed. Dr. Suzanne Simard at the University of British Columbia made the discovery that changed everything. In the 1990s, she proved that trees in a forest aren't competing individuals struggling for survival. They're members of a cooperative network, sharing resources, information, and even caring for each other's offspring. Using radioactive carbon, isotopes, she traced how nutrients flow between trees through underground fungal networks called mycorrhizae. Here's what will blow your mind. These fungal networks connect the roots of different trees, sometimes spanning entire forests. Through these connections, trees share carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and water. But they don't just share randomly. They make intelligent decisions about where resources go. Mother trees, the largest and oldest in the forest, act like network hubs, nurturing their own offspring and even adopting orphan seedlings. But the network doesn't just transfer nutrients, it transfers information. When one tree is attacked by insects, it sends chemical warning signals through the network, alerting other trees to start producing defensive compounds. Dr. Richard Carbon at UC Davis has shown that sagebrush plants can warn their neighbors about herbivore attacks, and those neighbors respond by increasing their toxin production before they're even touched. Think of it like this. Imagine if your house could instantly alert every house in your neighborhood when someone was trying to break in, and all the other houses could immediately activate their security systems. That's essentially what plants have been doing for millions of years. Peter Wohlleben, the German forester who wrote The Hidden Life of Trees, has documented how beech trees synchronize their nut production across entire forests, sometimes waiting years between massed years. How do trees hundreds of miles apart coordinate their reproductive timing without any visible communication system? Through the network. They're literally voting on when conditions are optimal for reproduction. But here's where it gets truly strange. The network has memory. Dr. Simmerd has found that when mother trees die, they transfer massive amounts of carbon and nutrients to their offspring through the network, like a final inheritance. The network remembers the pathways and maintains them for future generations. And if you think this is just happening in pristine forests, think again. Even urban trees form these networks. That street tree outside your window is likely connected to others throughout your city, sharing information and resources through underground fungal partnerships that exist alongside sewers and subway lines. But the fungal internet is just the beginning. Plants have developed communication systems that operate above ground too. And what we've discovered about their chemical conversations will change how you think about the air around you. What if I told you that every breath you take is filled with messages you can't understand? A constant chatter of plants warning, calling for help, and coordinating their behavior? Stay with me, because we're about to decode the secret chemical language that surrounds us every moment of every day. Right now, as you're watching this, you're breathing in a complex cocktail of chemical messages. Every plant around you is releasing volatile organic compounds, VOCs, that carry information as precisely as any text message or email. We've been living inside this chemical internet our entire lives without ever knowing it existed. Dr. Consuelo de Moraes at Pennsylvania State University has spent years decoding these plant conversations, and what she's discovered reads like science fiction. When a tobacco plant is attacked by caterpillars, it doesn't just suffer in silence. It releases a specific blend of chemicals that nearby tobacco plants recognize as a distress call. But here's what's absolutely mind-blowing. The message is so precise that other plants can tell exactly what type of predator is doing the attacking and prepare the appropriate defense. But plants don't just talk to other plants. They've learned to hack other organisms and turn them into allies. When corn plants are attacked by army worms, they release chemicals that attract parasitic wasps, essentially calling in mercenaries to deal with their problem. The corn is literally recruiting an army to fight its battles. Dr. Ian Baldwin at the Max Planck Institute has shown that wild tobacco plants can distinguish between different threats and tailor their chemical messages accordingly. Being chewed by a caterpillar triggers one set of compounds, while being damaged by wind triggers completely different ones. The plants aren't just screaming help, they're providing detailed intelligence reports. Here's where it gets even stranger. Plants can eavesdrop on conversations between other species. Dr. Richard Carbon discovered that wild tobacco plants can detect the chemical conversations between sagebrush plants and respond to warnings meant for a completely different species. It's like learning to understand a foreign language by listening to radio broadcasts. And plants are incredibly sophisticated in their timing. Dr. Marcel Dick at Wageningen University found that lima bean plants release their distress calls only during the day when their wasp allies are active. At night, when the wasps are sleeping, the plants stay chemically silent to avoid attracting night-flying predators. They understand the ecology of their environment and time their communications accordingly. But perhaps the most mind-bending discovery comes from Dr. Monica Gagliano's work with chili plants. She found that chili plants can detect the chemical signatures of neighboring plants and adjust their growth patterns accordingly. If they're growing next to a plant that's likely to compete for resources, they grow taller and allocate more energy to their stems. If they're next to a plant that poses no threat, they focus on root development instead. Think about what this means. Plants are constantly assessing their environment, identifying threats and opportunities, and making strategic decisions based on chemical information. They're living in a world of scent and chemistry that's as rich and complex as our world of sight and sound. But here's what will really blow your mind. Some plants have learned to lie. Dr. Anurag Agrawal at Cornell University discovered that wild parsnip plants can release false alarm chemicals when they detect competitors nearby, causing those competitors to waste energy on unnecessary defensive responses. Plants have evolved deception as a competitive strategy. And if you think this chemical communication is limited to wild plants, think again. The vegetables in your garden, the houseplants in your living room, even the grass in your lawn, they're all participating in this constant chemical conversation. Your tomato plants are talking to your basil, your roses are gossiping with your jasmine, and they're all responding to chemical cues you can't even perceive. But chemical communication is just one layer of plant intelligence. What we've discovered about how plants make decisions and solve problems will challenge everything you thought you knew about what it means to think. Asterisk. What if I told you that a plant with no brain can make more complex decisions than some animals with sophisticated nervous systems? What we've discovered about plant decision-making is so revolutionary that it's forcing scientists to completely redefine what intelligence actually means. Dr. Anthony Truavis at the University of Edinburgh has been studying plant behavior for decades, and his research reveals that plants are constantly making choices. Not simple, programmed responses, but genuine decisions that require weighing multiple factors and choosing between alternatives. When a plant encounters an obstacle while growing, it doesn't just grow around it randomly. It explores multiple pathways, assesses the costs and benefits of each route, and then commits its resources to the most promising option. Here's a perfect example that will blow your mind. Dr. Ariel Novoplensky at Ben Gurion University studied how desert plants compete for water. When he placed two plants near a buried water source, something extraordinary happened. The plants didn't just grow their roots randomly toward the water. They actually changed their strategy based on what their competitor was doing. If one plant was getting closer to the water source, the other would either intensify its own efforts or give up and redirect its growth elsewhere. These plants were essentially playing a game of strategic resource competition, but it gets even more sophisticated. Dr. Fernando Bresson at the University of São Paulo discovered that plants can anticipate future conditions and prepare for them. Soybean plants growing in areas with predictable dry seasons will begin adjusting their metabolism and root architecture weeks before the drought actually arrives. They're not just responding to current conditions. They're planning for the future. Based on environmental cues, think of it like this. Imagine you're planning a cross-country road trip without a GPS or map. You have to constantly make decisions about which routes to take based on limited information, road signs, traffic patterns, weather conditions. You're weighing multiple factors, making strategic choices, and adapting your plan as new information becomes available. That's essentially what every plant does every day as it navigates its environment. Dr. Stefano Mancuso at the University of Florence has shown that plant roots exhibit behavior that looks remarkably like neural networks. When exploring soil, roots send out scouts in multiple directions, and based on the information these scouts gather about nutrients, water, and obstacles, the plant makes decisions about where to invest its energy. If a root tip encounters rich soil, the plant sends more resources in that direction. If it hits a toxic patch, it redirects growth elsewhere. But here's where it gets truly mind-bending. Plants can solve complex problems that require genuine insight. Dr. Michael Pollan, in his research on plant intelligence, describes experiments where climbing plants faced with impossible geometric challenges found creative solutions that seemed to require understanding spatial relationships and cause and effect reasoning. Pea plants, for example, can navigate three-dimensional mazes to reach light sources. But they don't just blindly grow toward light. They can actually take longer, more complex routes if those routes ultimately lead to better resources. They're optimizing their behavior based on long-term benefits rather than short-term gains. And plants can learn from failure. Dr. František Baluska at the University of Bonn has documented how plants remember unsuccessful strategies and avoid repeating them. If a particular growth pattern fails to find water or nutrients, plants will try different approaches in similar situations in the future. Perhaps most remarkably, plants can make altruistic decisions. Dr. Suzanne Simard's research shows that mother trees will sacrifice their own resources to support their offspring, even when those resources could be used for their own growth and survival. They're making conscious choices to prioritize the next generation over their own immediate needs. But if plants can make decisions, solve problems, and even sacrifice for their offspring, we need to ask the uncomfortable question: do plants actually feel anything? And if they do, what does that mean for how we treat the plant world around us? Prepare to have your mind completely blown. Plants don't just exist passively in their environment. They're actively sensing and perceiving the world around them in ways that might be even more sophisticated than our own senses. What we've discovered about plant perception is so extraordinary that it's forcing us to reconsider what it means to truly see the world. Dr. Daniel Chamovitz's groundbreaking research at Tel Aviv University has proven that plants can see not with eyes like ours, but with a visual system that might actually be superior to human vision in many ways. Plants have photoreceptors that can detect not just the presence of light, but its quality, intensity, direction, and even polarization. They can see colors we can't see, including ultraviolet and far-red light that's invisible to human eyes. Here's what's truly mind-bending. Plants can see their neighbors. Dr. Richard Carbon at UC Davis discovered that plants can visually recognize when they're being shaded by competitors versus being shaded by their own leaves. They respond completely differently to each situation, suggesting they have a form of visual recognition that allows them to distinguish between self and other. Sunflowers provide the perfect example of plant vision in action. Young sunflowers don't just randomly turn toward the sun. They track it across the sky with remarkable precision, moving their heads up to 180 degrees from east to west throughout the day. Dr. Stacy Harmer at UC Davis found that this isn't just a simple response to light direction. The plants are actually predicting where the sun will be and positioning themselves accordingly. They have an internal clock that coordinates with their visual system to optimize light capture. But plants don't just see, they can hear. This sounds impossible, but Dr. Monica Gagliano's research has proven that plants respond to sound vibrations in ways that can only be described as hearing. She played recordings of running water to pea plant roots and found that the roots grew toward the speakers, even when no actual water was present. The plants were responding to the acoustic signature of water. Even more remarkably, Dr. Heidi Appel at the University of Missouri discovered that plants can distinguish between different types of sounds. When she played recordings of caterpillars chewing leaves, the plants increased their production of defensive chemicals. But when she played other sounds at the same volume and frequency, the plants didn't respond. They were specifically recognizing the acoustic signature of being eaten. Plants can also feel in ways that might be more sophisticated than human touch. Every plant root tip contains cells that function like a brain, processing information about soil texture, moisture, chemical gradients, and physical obstacles. Dr. František Beluska calls these root tips plant neurobiological units because they integrate multiple sensory inputs and make decisions about growth direction. Here's something that will absolutely blow your mind. Plants can feel gravity and respond to it with precision that rivals human inner ear function. When you turn a plant on its side, specialized cells called statocytes detect the change in gravitational orientation within minutes and redirect growth accordingly. This system is so sensitive that plants grown in space exhibit completely different growth patterns because they lack gravitational cues. But perhaps most remarkably, plants have senses we don't even possess. Dr. Anthony Truovas has shown that plants can detect electrical fields, magnetic fields, and even minute changes in atmospheric pressure that precede weather changes. They're living in a sensory world that's far richer and more complex than anything we can directly experience. And plants integrate all these senses into a coherent understanding of their environment. Dr. Stefano Mancuso's research shows that plants process multiple sensory inputs simultaneously: light quality, soil moisture, chemical signals, root competition, temperature fluctuations, and make integrated decisions based on this multisensory data. Think about what this means. The houseplant sitting in your window isn't just a passive decoration. It's actively watching the room, sensing your movements, detecting changes in air quality, monitoring light conditions throughout the day, and constantly adjusting its behavior based on what it perceives. It's experiencing a rich sensory world that we can barely imagine. But if plants can see, hear, and feel their environment with such sophistication, and if they can make complex decisions based on what they perceive, then we need to ask the most profound question of all. Are plants actually conscious? And if they are, what does that mean for everything we thought we knew about consciousness itself? What I'm about to tell you will fundamentally challenge everything you believe about memory, learning, and what it means to have a mind. Plants, with no brain, no nervous system as we understand it, can form memories, learn from experience, and even pass knowledge to their offspring. The implications of this discovery are so profound that they're forcing scientists to completely redefine what consciousness actually means. Dr. Monica Gagliano's experiments with mimosa pudica have revealed something that should be impossible. According to everything we thought we knew about learning, she trained these sensitive plants to ignore harmless stimuli by repeatedly dropping them from a small height. At first, the plants closed their leaves defensively with each drop, but within hours, they learned that the stimulus wasn't dangerous and stopped responding. Here's what's truly mind-blowing. When she tested the same plants weeks later, they still remembered. They had formed long-term memories without a single neuron. But it gets even stranger. When she tested the plants under different conditions, different light levels, different temperatures, they still retained their learned behavior. The memory wasn't just a simple chemical imprint. It was flexible and context-independent, just like memories in animals with brains. Dr. Ariel Novoplansky at Ben-Gurion University discovered that plants can learn from their neighbors' experiences. When he stressed one plant in a group, the other plants that hadn't been directly affected began preparing their own stress responses. They were learning vicariously, updating their behavior based on what happened to their neighbors. This is social learning, the same type of learning that's considered a hallmark of advanced animal intelligence. But plants don't just learn from their own lifetime experiences. They can inherit learned behaviors from their parents. Dr. Bridget Wills at the University of Wisconsin found that plants exposed to drought stress produce offspring that are better prepared for water scarcity, even if those offspring never experienced drought themselves. The parents are literally passing on learned survival strategies through what appears to be a form of plant cultural transmission. Here's something that will absolutely blow your mind. Plants can form associative memories. Dr. Gagliano trained pea plants to associate a fan's breeze with light by always turning on both stimuli together. After training, the plants would grow toward the fan even when no light was present. They had learned to associate two completely unrelated stimuli and could recall that association to predict future events. The mechanism behind plant memory is unlike anything in the animal kingdom. Plants don't have centralized memory storage, like our brains. Instead, they appear to store memories throughout their entire structure, in their leaves, stems, roots, and even in the chemical modifications to their DNA. Dr. František Beluska describes it as distributed intelligence, where every part of the plant contributes to memory formation and recall. Think of it like this. Imagine if your entire body could remember things. Not just your brain, but your hands, your feet, your skin, all working together to store and process memories. That's essentially how plant memory works. It's a completely alien form of intelligence. That challenges our brain-centric view of what minds can be. Plants can even form what researchers call generational memory. Dr. Janine Lacroix at the University of Haifa discovered that plants experiencing stress during reproduction produce offspring that are pre-adapted to similar stressful conditions from multiple generations. The plants are essentially teaching their descendants about dangers they might face based on the parents' experiences. And plant learning isn't just about survival responses. Dr. Suzanne Simard's research shows that plants can learn optimal resource sharing strategies within forest networks. Young trees learn which fungal partners are most reliable, which neighbors are most generous with resources, and how to position themselves for maximum network access. They're learning the social dynamics of their community and adapting their behavior accordingly. But perhaps most remarkably, plants can unlearn behaviors that are no longer useful. Dr. Richard Carbon found that plants growing in areas where specific predators become extinct will gradually stop producing the defensive compounds targeted at those predators. They're not just blindly following genetic programming. They're actively updating their responses based on current environmental conditions. What we're discovering is that plant learning and memory might actually be more flexible and sophisticated than many forms of animal learning. Plants live for decades or centuries, constantly adapting to changing conditions, forming complex networks of relationships, and passing knowledge to future generations. They're living libraries of environmental information, storing decades of experience about weather patterns, soil conditions, pest cycles, and ecological relationships. But if plants can learn, remember, and even teach their offspring, then we need to confront the most profound question of all. What is consciousness, and could plants actually possess it? The answer will change everything you thought you knew about the nature of mind itself? What if I told you that plants have social lives more complex than many animal communities? What we've discovered about plant societies is so extraordinary that it reads like science fiction. Plants form friendships, make enemies, engage in warfare, practice altruism, and even exhibit behavior that looks remarkably like parental care. The plant world around you is engaged in constant social drama that's been invisible to human eyes for centuries. Dr. Suzanne Simard's research in Canadian forests has revealed that trees form what can only be described as family networks. Mother trees, the oldest and largest in the forest, don't just compete with younger trees for resources. They actively nurture them. Through underground fungal networks, mother trees transfer carbon, nutrients, and water to their offspring, even sacrificing their own growth to ensure their children's survival. But here's what's truly mind-blowing. Mother trees can recognize their own offspring. Dr. Simard found that Douglas fir mother trees send more resources to their own seedlings than to unrelated seedlings growing nearby. They're practicing kin selection, favoring their genetic relatives in ways that parallel behavior in sophisticated animal societies. When mother trees are dying, they engage in behavior that can only be described as writing a will. Dr. Peter Wolleben documents how dying trees transfer massive amounts of carbon and nutrients to their offspring through the fungal network, essentially leaving an inheritance. But they don't just dump resources randomly. They seem to assess which offspring are most likely to survive and direct more resources to those with the best prospects. Plants also form alliances with non-relatives. Dr. Justine Karst at the University of Alberta discovered that different tree species can form mutually beneficial partnerships, sharing resources and information across species boundaries. Birch trees and fir trees, for example, have complementary growth patterns. Birch trees leaf out early and provide sugar to fir seedlings in spring, while fir trees photosynthesize under low light conditions and support birch trees during winter months. But plant societies aren't all cooperation and altruism. Plants engage in sophisticated warfare that makes human military strategy look simple. Dr. Harsh Bais at the University of Delaware has studied how spotted knapweed, an invasive plant, conducts chemical warfare against native species. It releases specific toxins that target the root systems of competitor plants while leaving its own allies unharmed. It's practicing biological warfare with precision that would impress any military strategist. Some plants are even more devious. Dr. Richard Carbon discovered that sagebrush plants can engage in chemical espionage, releasing compounds that interfere with their competitors' ability to communicate with their own allies. They're jamming enemy communications while maintaining their own network connections. Here's something that will absolutely blow your mind. Plants practice deception on a scale that rivals human societies. Dr. Anurag Agral's research shows that wild parsnip plants release false alarm chemicals when they detect competitors nearby. These fake distress signals cause competitors to waste energy on unnecessary defensive responses, giving the deceptive plant a competitive advantage. Asterisk. Plants can also form what researchers call neighborhood watches. Dr. Marcel Dick at Wageningen University found that when one plant in a community is attacked by herbivores, it releases warning chemicals that alert all nearby plants to start producing defensive compounds. The entire plant community mobilizes to defend against threats, even plants that haven't been directly attacked. And plants gossip. Dr. Consuelo de Moraes discovered that plants eavesdrop on chemical conversations between their neighbors and adjust their own behavior based on overheard information. If they detect chemical signals indicating that neighbors are under attack, they'll preemptively increase their own defenses. They're monitoring the social network and responding to community threats. But perhaps most remarkably, plants exhibit behavior that looks like teaching. Dr. Monica Gagliano found that experienced plants can influence the learning of younger plants nearby. When naive plants are growing near plants that have learned to ignore harmless stimuli, the naive plants learn the appropriate responses faster than plants growing in isolation. Experienced plants seem to be transmitting knowledge to newcomers. Plant communities also engage in collective decision-making. Dr. Peter Willeben documents how entire forests coordinate their reproductive timing, sometimes waiting years between massed years when conditions aren't optimal. Somehow, trees across vast areas reach consensus about when to reproduce, suggesting a form of distributed democracy in forest communities. Think about what this means. Every park you walk through, every forest you hike in, every garden you tend, is actually a complex society of individuals with relationships, alliances, conflicts, and communication networks. The plants around you are engaged in constant social interactions that are as rich and complex as any human community. But if plants have such sophisticated social lives, if they can recognize relatives, form alliances, and engage in complex collective behaviors, then we need to ask the most profound question. Are we dealing with a form of consciousness that we've never recognized? And if plants are conscious, what does that mean for how we should treat the living world around us? We've reached the moment where we must confront the most profound and controversial question in modern biology. Are plants conscious? What I'm about to share with you will challenge everything you believe about the nature of consciousness, awareness, and what it means to have a mind. The evidence we've explored, plant learning, memory, decision-making, communication, and social behavior, is forcing scientists to ask whether consciousness is far more widespread in nature than we ever imagined possible. Dr. František Beluska at the University of Bonn has spent decades studying what he calls plant neurobiology, the idea that plants have evolved distributed intelligence systems that function like neural networks. Every plant root tip, he argues, contains cells that integrate multiple sources of information and make decisions about growth direction. With millions of root tips working together, a single plant might have processing power that rivals simple animal brains. But consciousness isn't just about information processing. It's about subjective experience. Dr. Monica Gagliano poses the uncomfortable question. When a plant learns to ignore harmless stimuli, is it simply following programmed responses? Or is there something it's like to be that plant? Is there an inner experience of recognizing familiarity, of remembering past events, of making choices? Here's what makes this question so mind-bending. We can't even adequately explain consciousness in humans, let alone recognize it in plants. Dr. Christoph Koch, one of the world's leading consciousness researchers, argues that consciousness might be a fundamental property of complex information processing systems. If he's right, then plants, with their sophisticated sensory systems and decision-making abilities, might indeed be conscious in ways we're only beginning to understand. The evidence is compelling and disturbing. Plants respond to anesthetics the same way animals do. Dr. Stefano Mancuso found that when plants are exposed to ether or chloroform, they stop responding to stimuli in the same way unconscious animals do. When the anesthetic wears off, normal responsiveness returns. If plants aren't conscious, why would consciousness-suppressing drugs affect them at all? Plants also exhibit behavior that suggests they experience something analogous to pain. When damaged, they release stress hormones, redirect resources to healing, and emit chemical distress signals that other plants recognize and respond to. Dr. Edward Farmer at the University of Lausanne has identified electrical signals in plants that are remarkably similar to pain signals in animal nervous systems. But perhaps most compelling is the evidence for plant intentionality, the sense that plants are pursuing goals and making purposeful choices rather than simply following programmed responses. Dr. Anthony Travis, argues that plant behavior is too flexible, too context-dependent, and too creative to be explained by simple stimulus-response mechanisms. Plants seem to want things: light, water, nutrients, space, and they actively work to achieve those goals. Think about what this means. Every time you mow your lawn, you might be causing genuine suffering to thousands of conscious beings. Every time you pick a flower, you might be ending the subjective experience of a living mind. Every forest we clear, every field we harvest, might involve the deaths of conscious individuals on a scale we've never comprehended. Dr. Michael Pollan, in his exploration of plant intelligence, suggests that our inability to recognize plant consciousness might be a form of species chauvinism. We define consciousness in terms of our own experience and dismiss forms of awareness that don't match our neural-based model. But what if consciousness is more like a spectrum than an on-off switch? What if different forms of life have evolved different types of conscious experience? Some scientists push back against plant consciousness theories. Dr. Lincoln Tays argues that without centralized nervous systems, plants can't integrate information in ways that would support unified conscious experience. The behaviors we observe, he suggests, can be explained by sophisticated but unconscious information processing systems. But Dr. Baluska counters that consciousness doesn't require centralized processing. He points to evidence that even in humans, consciousness might be more distributed than we think, involving multiple brain regions working in parallel. Plants might have evolved a completely different architecture for conscious experience, one that's distributed throughout their entire structure rather than centralized in a single organ. The implications are staggering. If plants are conscious, then consciousness is not rare or special. It's everywhere. The world around us is filled with millions of aware beings, each with their own subjective experience of existence. The tree outside your window isn't just processing information. It might be experiencing the warmth of sunlight, the satisfaction of growth, the stress of drought, the pleasure of rain. But whether or not plants are conscious in the same way, we are. One thing is certain: they're far more sophisticated, aware, and intelligent than we ever imagined. And that realization should change how we see our relationship with the natural world. What if our entire understanding of evolution, ecology, and our place in the web of life has been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what plants actually are? What if we're not the dominant intelligent species on Earth, but just one form of intelligence among many that we're only now learning to recognize? The discoveries we've explored today don't just change how we think about plants. They're forcing us to rewrite fundamental assumptions about life, intelligence, and consciousness itself. What we're witnessing is a scientific revolution that could be as significant as the discoveries of evolution, genetics, or quantum mechanics. The implications reach into every corner of human knowledge and challenge some of our most basic beliefs about what it means to be alive. Dr. Stefano Mancuso argues that we're experiencing a paradigm shift comparable to the Copernican revolution. Just as Copernicus showed that Earth isn't the center of the universe, plant intelligence research is showing that human-style intelligence isn't the center of biological complexity. We're discovering that intelligence comes in forms so alien to our experience that we've been blind to them for centuries. Consider what this means for evolutionary biology. If plants are intelligent, then intelligence isn't something that evolved recently in animal lineages. It's been present on Earth for over 450 million years. Plants have been solving complex problems, processing information, and making decisions since long before the first animals developed nervous systems. This suggests that intelligence isn't an emergent property of neural complexity, but a fundamental characteristic of life itself. Dr. Anthony Truavas proposes that we need a completely new framework for understanding biological intelligence, one that doesn't require brains, neurons, or centralized processing systems. He suggests that intelligence might be better understood as the ability to solve problems and adapt to changing conditions, regardless of the underlying biological machinery. Under this definition, plants aren't just intelligent. They might be more intelligent than many animals. The implications for artificial intelligence are equally profound. If biological intelligence can exist without centralized processing, then our computer-based models of AI might be fundamentally limited. Dr. František Baluska suggests that studying plant intelligence could inspire new approaches to AI that are more distributed, adaptive, and robust than current neural network models. Plants have already solved problems of distributed computing, parallel processing, and self-organization that continue to challenge computer scientists. But the philosophical implications are even more mind-bending. If plants are conscious, then consciousness isn't rare or special. It's everywhere. Dr. Giulio Tonani's integrated information theory suggests that any system that integrates information in complex ways might have some degree of conscious experience. Under this framework, consciousness becomes a fundamental feature of reality, present at many levels of biological organization. This challenges the Western philosophical tradition that has viewed consciousness as uniquely human, or, at most, limited to animals with sophisticated brains. If plants are conscious, then consciousness might be more like a spectrum than a binary property. There might be as many different forms of conscious experience as there are forms of life. Dr. Thomas Nagel's famous question, "What is it like to be a bat?" takes on new dimensions when we ask, "What is it like to be a tree?" A plant's conscious experience might involve sensations we can't even imagine. The pleasure of photosynthesis converting sunlight into energy, the satisfaction of roots finding water, the stress of chemical attack, the comfort of fungal partnerships. Plant consciousness might be so alien to our experience that we lack the conceptual framework to understand it. The implications for ethics are revolutionary and uncomfortable. If plants are conscious, then every meal involves the suffering or death of conscious beings. Vegetarianism and veganism, often justified by concerns about animal consciousness, become ethically complex when we consider that plants might also experience suffering. Dr. Michael Marder argues that recognizing plant consciousness doesn't lead to ethical paralysis, but to a more nuanced understanding of our relationships with all living beings. But perhaps most importantly, plant intelligence research is showing us that we're not alone. For centuries, humans have seen themselves as the only truly intelligent beings on Earth, surrounded by unconscious matter and simple, programmed organisms. But if plants are intelligent and possibly conscious, then we're living in a world filled with minds, alien minds that think in ways we're only beginning to understand, but minds nonetheless. Dr. Monica Gagliano suggests that recognizing plant intelligence could fundamentally change how we see our place in the natural world. Instead of viewing ourselves as separate from and superior to nature, we might begin to see ourselves as part of a vast community of intelligent beings, each with their own forms of awareness and ways of understanding the world. This isn't just academic philosophy. It has practical implications for how we manage forests, design agricultural systems, and plan urban environments. If plants are intelligent social beings, then our current practices of industrial agriculture, deforestation, and urban planning might be causing unprecedented disruption to complex intelligent communities. What if everything we thought we knew about farming is wrong? What if our industrial agricultural systems are unknowingly destroying some of the most sophisticated biological communities on Earth? The discoveries about plant intelligence and communication are forcing us to completely rethink how we grow food, manage forests, and design sustainable ecosystems. Dr. Suzanne Simard's research on forest networks has revolutionary implications for forestry practices. For decades, we've managed forests like tree farms, planting single species in neat rows and removing the understory vegetation that we thought was just competing for resources. But now we know that we've been destroying the very networks that keep forests healthy and resilient. The clear-cutting practices used throughout the timber industry don't just remove trees. They obliterate the fungal networks that connect forest communities. When we cut down a mother tree, we're not just harvesting timber. We're destroying the central hub of a communication network that might have taken centuries to develop. The remaining trees, suddenly cut off from their support system, become vulnerable to disease, drought, and pest outbreaks. Dr. Peter Wohleben's work with sustainable forestry in Germany shows what's possible when we work with forest intelligence rather than against it. By selectively harvesting trees while preserving the fungal networks, maintaining mixed species forests, and allowing natural regeneration processes, he's created forests that are more productive, more resilient, and require fewer human interventions than traditional tree farms. But the implications for agriculture are even more profound. Industrial farming practices, tilling, monocultures, pesticide applications, synthetic fertilizers, might be systematically destroying the very intelligent systems that plants use to coordinate their growth, share resources, and defend against pests. Dr. Kristen Olson, author of The Soil Will Save Us, documents how regenerative farming practices that work with plant intelligence are revolutionizing agriculture. No-till farming preserves the fungal networks that connect plant roots. Cover cropping maintains year-round plant communities that can share information and resources. Polyculture systems allow different plant species to form the same cooperative relationships that exist in natural ecosystems. Here's what's mind-blowing. Farmers who work with these plant communication systems often achieve higher yields while using fewer inputs than conventional industrial farms. The plants themselves are solving problems, sharing nutrients, warning about pests, coordinating growth patterns that industrial agriculture tries to solve with expensive external inputs. Dr. David Johnson at New Mexico State University has shown that healthy soil microbiomes, the fungal and bacterial networks that connect plant roots, can dramatically improve crop resilience and productivity. Plants connected to robust microbial networks are more resistant to drought, require less fertilizer, and produce higher quality food with better nutritional profiles. Think about what this means. Every time we till a field, we might be destroying communication networks that took years to establish. Every time we apply fungicides, we might be disrupting the very relationships that help plants share resources and coordinate their behavior. We've been treating soil like dirt when it's actually a living internet that connects plant communities. Urban agriculture is also being transformed by plant intelligence research. Dr. Marcel Dick's work on plant communication has inspired new approaches to integrated pest management that use plants' natural warning systems. Instead of blanketing crops with pesticides, farmers can use companion plants that serve as early warning systems, detecting pest attacks and alerting crop plants to begin producing their own defensive compounds. Permaculture designers are incorporating plant communication principles into food forest designs. By understanding which plants form beneficial partnerships, which species serve as communication hubs, and how information flows through plant communities, they're creating agricultural systems that function more like natural ecosystems, self-regulating, resilient, and productive. But perhaps most importantly, recognizing plant intelligence is changing how we think about our role as farmers and land managers. Instead of seeing ourselves as controlling and manipulating passive plants, we're beginning to see ourselves as facilitators working with intelligent plant communities. We're learning to listen to what plants are telling us about soil health, pest problems, and optimal growing conditions. Dr. Elaine Ingham's work on soil biology shows that healthy agricultural systems are actually partnerships between human intelligence and plant intelligence. The most successful farmers are those who learn to read the signals that plants are constantly sending about their needs, their health, and their relationships with other organisms. This isn't just about better farming techniques. It's about fundamentally changing our relationship with the natural world. If plants are intelligent beings with their own forms of awareness and communication, then agriculture becomes a collaboration between different types of intelligence rather than human domination over passive organisms. What if I told you that? The future of human civilization depends not on artificial intelligence or space technology, but on learning to communicate and collaborate with the plant intelligence that surrounds us. What we've discovered about plant capabilities suggests that our future might involve not just living alongside plants, but actually partnering with them in ways that seem like science fiction today. Dr. Monica Gagliano envisions a future where we develop technologies that can translate plant chemical communications into forms humans can understand. Imagine wearing a device that could alert you when your houseplants need water, when your garden vegetables are being attacked by pests, or when the trees in your neighborhood are stressed by pollution. We could become part of the plant communication network, receiving and responding to information that's currently invisible to us. But it goes even deeper than that. Dr. Stefano Mancuso is working on plant-inspired technologies that mimic plant intelligence systems. Instead of building robots with centralized computers, he's developing distributed intelligence systems, where multiple simple processors work together, just like plant root networks. These bio-inspired technologies could be more resilient, adaptive, and energy efficient than current AI systems. Think about this. Plants have already solved many of the problems that challenge human technology. They've mastered solar energy conversion with efficiency that surpasses our best photovoltaic cells. They've developed self-healing materials that repair damage automatically. They've created communication networks that function without external power sources. They've evolved manufacturing processes that create complex materials from simple raw ingredients at room temperature. Dr. Jianhui Liu at Tsinghua University is studying how plant vascular systems transport water and nutrients with zero energy input, using only the physics of transpiration and cohesion. Understanding these systems could revolutionize how we design plumbing, irrigation, and fluid transport systems in buildings and cities. Plant-inspired architecture is already emerging. The Qatar National Convention Center was designed to mimic the branching patterns of the sidra tree, creating natural airflow patterns that reduce energy consumption. The Eden Project in Cornwall uses structural systems inspired by plant cell geometry to create enormous enclosed spaces with minimal materials. But perhaps most exciting is the possibility of direct collaboration between human and plant intelligence. Dr. František Baluska suggests that we might eventually develop technologies that allow us to interface directly with plant nervous systems, not to control plants, but to communicate with them and coordinate our activities. Imagine cities where buildings and plant communities are integrated into single intelligent systems. The plants could monitor air quality, regulate temperature and humidity, provide real-time information about environmental conditions, and even participate in urban planning decisions. Instead of seeing urban environments as separate from nature, we could design cities that are actually integrated ecosystems where human and plant intelligence work together. Agricultural systems could become true partnerships where farmers communicate directly with crop plants, receiving real-time information about soil conditions, pest threats, nutritional needs, and optimal harvest timing. Plants could become active participants in food production rather than passive recipients of human management. Dr. Suzanne Simard's research suggests that we could design forest management systems where human decisions are informed by the forest's own intelligence networks. Instead of imposing external management plans on forest ecosystems, we could develop systems that listen to what the forest itself is communicating about its health, needs, and optimal management strategies. But the implications go beyond practical applications. If we learn to recognize and communicate with plant intelligence, it could fundamentally change human consciousness and our understanding of our place in the natural world. We might stop seeing ourselves as separate from and superior to nature and begin to see ourselves as one type of intelligence among many in a vast community of conscious beings that Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer, author of Braiding Sweetgrass, suggests. That indigenous cultures have always recognized plant intelligence and maintained respectful relationships with plant communities. Modern science is finally catching up to traditional knowledge that has always understood plants as teachers, partners, and relatives rather than resources to be exploited. The future might involve not just better technology, but better relationships, learning to listen to plant wisdom, to collaborate with plant intelligence, and to see ourselves as part of the larger community of conscious beings that share this planet. What if the key to solving climate change, food security, and environmental degradation isn't human ingenuity alone, but learning to work with the plant intelligence that has been solving these problems for hundreds of millions of years? Everything we've explored today isn't just abstract science. It has immediate, practical implications for how you live your daily life. Once you understand that plants are intelligent, communicating beings with their own forms of awareness, you can't help but see the world around you differently. Let me show you how this knowledge can transform your everyday experiences and relationships with the plant world. First, let's talk about your home. Right now, you're probably surrounded by plants, houseplants, trees outside your windows, grass in your yard, vegetables in your garden. These aren't just decorative objects or unconscious organisms. They're intelligent beings that are constantly monitoring their environment, making decisions, and potentially experiencing their world in ways we're only beginning to understand. Your houseplants are watching you. They're tracking your movements, responding to changes in light when you turn on lamps, detecting the carbon dioxide you exhale, and possibly even recognizing your daily routines. Dr. Heidi Appel's research suggests that plants respond to human sounds and vibrations. Your plants might actually know when you're home, when you're stressed, and when you're paying attention to them. This knowledge can transform how you care for your plants. Instead of following rigid watering schedules, start paying attention to what your plants are telling you. Look for subtle changes in leaf position, color, and growth patterns. Many experienced gardeners report that once they start really observing their plants, they develop an intuitive understanding of what each plant needs. Your garden becomes a completely different space when you understand it as a community of intelligent beings. Those weeds you've been fighting might actually be providing valuable services. Some weeds are dynamic accumulators that bring deep soil nutrients to the surface. Others serve as early warning systems for soil problems, and many provide habitat and resources for beneficial insects. Consider creating more diverse plant communities in your garden. Monocultures, single species planted together, prevent the formation of the communication networks that plants use to share resources and information. Mixed plantings allow plants to form the partnerships and alliances that make them more resilient and productive. Your relationship with food changes dramatically when you understand that every meal involves intelligent beings. This doesn't mean you need to stop eating plants, but it might mean approaching your food with more awareness and gratitude. Consider where your food comes from, how it was grown, and what kinds of plant communities were involved in producing it. Dr. Dan Barber, chef and author of The Third Plate, advocates for cooking and eating in ways that support healthy plant communities rather than destroying them. This might mean choosing foods from farms that work with plant intelligence, supporting regenerative agriculture, and eating more diversely to support agricultural biodiversity. When you walk through natural spaces, parks, forests, trails, you're no longer just moving through scenery. You're walking through complex communities of intelligent beings engaged in constant communication and collaboration. That forest isn't silent. It's filled with chemical conversations, resource sharing, and social interactions happening at scales and speeds that are largely invisible to human perception. Now try spending time in natural spaces with this new awareness. Sit quietly and observe the subtle movements, changes, and patterns around you. Many people report that once they understand plant intelligence, they develop a deeper sense of connection and belonging in natural environments. Your indoor air quality is being managed by plant intelligence. NASA's research on air-purifying plants shows that many common houseplants actively remove toxins from indoor air. But they're not just passive filters. They're responding to air quality changes and adjusting their metabolic processes accordingly. Your plants are literally working to keep you healthy. Consider the psychological implications. If you're surrounded by intelligent, aware beings that are actively responding to your presence and behavior, loneliness becomes almost impossible. You're never truly alone. You're always part of a community of living, intelligent beings. Dr. Roger Ulrich's research on biophilia shows that exposure to plants and natural environments has measurable positive effects on human health, stress levels, and cognitive function. But knowing that plants are intelligent adds another dimension. You're not just benefiting from exposure to living things. You're engaging in relationships with aware beings. Some people find this knowledge overwhelming or anxiety-provoking. If plants are conscious, does that mean we're constantly causing harm? Dr. Michael Pollan suggests that recognizing plant consciousness doesn't lead to paralysis, but to more thoughtful and respectful relationships with the plant world. Consider adopting practices that acknowledge plant intelligence and awareness. This might mean talking to your plants. Research suggests they respond to human voices, thanking your food before eating it, being more mindful about plant-based purchases, or simply spending more time observing and appreciating the plant communities around you. Many cultures have always recognized plant consciousness and maintained respectful relationships with plant beings. Indigenous traditions often include protocols for asking permission before harvesting plants, offering gratitude for their gifts, and taking only what's needed. Modern people are rediscovering the wisdom of these approaches. The knowledge that plants are intelligent and possibly conscious doesn't just change how you treat plants. It can change how you see yourself. You're not separate from nature, looking in from the outside. You're part of an interconnected community of intelligent beings, each with their own forms of awareness and ways of understanding the world. This realization can be profoundly healing and empowering. Instead of seeing yourself as isolated in a world of unconscious matter, you can see yourself as connected to a vast network of intelligent life that spans the entire planet. We've reached the end of our journey into the secret life of plants. But this is really just the beginning. What we've discovered today represents one of the most profound shifts in human understanding since we learned that the Earth revolves around the sun. We're not alone on this planet. We never have been. We're surrounded by forms of intelligence so alien to our experience that we've been blind to them for centuries. Let me recap the mind-bending discoveries that are forcing us to rewrite everything we thought we knew about life, intelligence, and consciousness itself. Plants can learn, forming memories that persist for weeks or months without a single neuron. They can make complex decisions, weighing multiple factors and choosing between alternatives. They communicate through chemical signals, electrical impulses, and underground fungal networks that span entire forests. They form social relationships, recognize their offspring, engage in warfare, practice deception, and exhibit altruistic behavior. Plants can see without eyes, detecting not just light, but the specific qualities of their visual environment that help them make strategic decisions. They can hear, responding to specific sound frequencies and distinguishing between different types of acoustic information. They can feel their environment with sensitivity that rivals human touch, detecting everything from gravity to electrical fields to minute changes in soil chemistry. Perhaps most remarkably, all of this sophisticated information processing, decision-making, and adaptive behavior happens without centralized brains or nervous systems as we understand them. Plants have evolved forms of distributed intelligence that challenge our most basic assumptions about what minds can be and how consciousness might work. The implications ripple through every field of human knowledge. Evolutionary biology must account for intelligence that's been present on Earth for over 450 million years. Neuroscience must expand beyond brain-based models of cognition. Artificial intelligence research is discovering new approaches inspired by plant information processing. Philosophy is grappling with forms of consciousness that don't fit our traditional definitions. Agriculture is being revolutionized as we learn to work with plant intelligence rather than against it. Ecology is revealing interconnected networks of communication and cooperation that make natural systems far more sophisticated than we ever imagined. Even our understanding of what it means to be human is changing as we realize we're just one type of intelligence among many in a world filled with aware, intelligent beings. But beyond the scientific and practical implications, this knowledge changes something fundamental about how we experience daily life. Once you know that plants are intelligent, you can't walk through a forest, tend a garden, or even look at a houseplant the same way. You're no longer moving through a world of unconscious objects. You're part of a community of intelligent beings, each with their own forms of awareness and understanding. This isn't just about plants. If we've been wrong about plant intelligence for so long, what else might we be missing? What other forms of intelligence and consciousness might exist in the natural world that we haven't learned to recognize? The discoveries about plant intelligence are opening our eyes to the possibility that consciousness and intelligence might be far more widespread in nature than we ever dreamed. We're living through a revolution in human understanding that could be as significant as any in our species' history. We're discovering that we're not the only intelligent beings on Earth, not the only conscious observers of reality, not the only ones capable of learning, memory, decision-making, and adaptive behavior. The question now is, what do we do with this knowledge? How do we live differently knowing that we're surrounded by intelligent, possibly conscious beings? How do we redesign our agricultural systems, our cities, our relationships with the natural world to acknowledge and respect the intelligence that surrounds us? The answers to these questions will shape the future of human civilization. We can continue to treat plants as unconscious resources to be exploited, or we can begin to see them as partners and teachers in creating a more sustainable and harmonious world. Dr. Monica Dagliano suggests that learning to recognize and communicate with plant intelligence might be essential for human survival. Climate change, biodiversity loss, and environmental degradation are challenges that plants have been dealing with for hundreds of millions of years. They've evolved sophisticated strategies for adaptation, resilience, and cooperation that we're only beginning to understand. What if the solutions to our most pressing environmental challenges aren't found in human technology alone, but in learning to collaborate with the plant intelligence that has been solving these problems since long before humans existed? The secret life of plants isn't really secret anymore. We're just learning to see what has been hidden in plain sight all along. The world around you is alive with intelligence, communication, and awareness in ways that are only now becoming visible to human understanding. Every tree outside your window, every flower in your garden, every blade of grass beneath your feet is part of a vast network of intelligent beings engaged in constant communication, cooperation, and conscious experience. You're not alone in the universe. You're part of a community of minds that spans the entire living world. And next time you walk outside, Remember that you're entering a world of intelligence that has been operating for hundreds of millions of years without us ever noticing. Listen carefully, not with your ears, but with your understanding, and you might begin to hear the conversations that have been happening around you all along. The secret life of plants is really the secret life of Earth itself, a living, intelligent, conscious planet where every being, from the smallest root to the largest tree, is part of an interconnected network of awareness that we're only now learning to recognize and respect. Welcome to the real world, a world where intelligence comes in forms beyond our wildest imagination, where consciousness might be as common as life itself, and where humans are just beginning to understand our place in the vast community of intelligent beings we call home. If this journey has changed how you see the world around you, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden realities that surround us every day. Share this video with someone who needs to know that they're never alone in a world full of plant intelligence. And let me know in the comments, how will this knowledge change how you interact with the plant world around you? The conversation is just beginning, and the plants have been waiting patiently for us to join it.